Hello and welcome to the Franz van Kattel interview. I'm Annette Young. It's been more than 5 months now since US Senator George Mitchell stepped down from the job as the US Middle East Special Envoy. For a man who secured a truce in Northern Ireland, it seemed reaching peace this time around was almost impossible. Senator Mitchell is here in London at an event here at Chatham House. It's been sponsored by OneVoice Europe, an NGO that's dedicated to finding an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by working with both sides. Senator Mitchell, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to OneVoice for organising this event.
You brokered peace in Northern Ireland, but failed to do the same thing in the Middle East. Are you a disappointed man?
I think everyone involved in the process has been disappointed at our failure to bring about an agreement. There have been 10 American presidents and 19 secretaries of state and countless envoys that have made the same effort since the State of Israel was created, and we have to continue. While personally I wish it would have been possible in the 2 years that I served, I recognize the difficulty and the complexity of the conflict have resulted in peace being elusive, but we're going to continue. The U.S. government is going to continue. President Obama certainly is committed, and we hope that soon enough the parties will recognize that it's best for both of them to resolve the conflict and create two states living side by side in peace and security.
Why could it happen in Northern Ireland and not in the Middle East?
They're very different circumstances. No two human beings are alike, no two societies are alike, no two conflicts are alike. The time just was right in Northern Ireland. It was also a very long-standing conflict, also had religion, territory, national identity, but there were many differences as well.
Where do you lay the blame?
I don't think the right way to approach these problems is to begin by trying to lay the blame. The best way to begin is to look forward and try to figure out what's needed to overcome the obstacles that exist. And I believe that both sides understand the importance of direct negotiation with the active and sustained support of the United States and other parties, other governments and other interested parties to try to reach that agreement. It will be difficult for them to do, politically difficult on both sides, but the argument that I believe will ultimately prevail is that it will be far more difficult for them if they don't reach an agreement. So I think that will lead them ultimately to reach an agreement and to create the two-state solution that we all think is the right one.
But in the meantime, Israelis continue to build settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. We did see a 10-month freeze, however. Yes. The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas refused to come back to the table. Was it a case that he believed at the end of the day his Israeli counterpart, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, just wasn't ready to make peace?
It's clear that there's a high level of mistrust on both sides. The ultimate reasons for the decision obviously would have to come from President Abbas himself. But I told him and I told Prime Minister Netanyahu that I believed that both of them were serious about wanting peace. The question is, are they serious enough to take the painful steps that will be necessary to achieve peace and accommodate the other side? To me, that's the key. Israel has a state, a very successful state, to which the United States is strongly committed for its security. But they don't have security for their people. They have anxiety and fear because of the history of recent attacks and wars and rockets. They ought to have security. The Palestinians, on the other hand, don't have a state, and they want one, and they ought to have one, a viable, independent, sovereign state. I believe that neither can attain its objective by denying to the other side its objective. Stated another way, I don't think the Palestinians are going to get a state until the people of Israel have a reasonable and sustainable sense of security, and I don't think the Israelis can get that until the Palestinians get their state. So they should have a mutual interest in accommodating the principal objective of the other. That's a hard concept to get across and understand, especially in politically divided societies, as theirs are. But I think it will become clear, and I hope very much it will happen soon.
Do you feel that you got the requisite amount of support from the White House in doing your job?
Yes, I did. The President is very keenly supportive of this effort. He's completely committed. As you know, he appointed me to that position 2 days after he took office. In fact, it's kind of a humorous story. He wanted me to leave that night. He said he appointed me in the afternoon. We made an announcement at the State Department, and he suggested that I take off that night to go. I said, Mr. President, I've got to go home. I've got to pack a suitcase. I've got to say goodbye to my wife and children. It'll be a day or so before I leave. So I left that weekend, but he is very much committed.
His speech in Cairo in June 2009, in which he called for a Palestinian state and a freeze on Israeli settlement building, was it a case of being way too ambitious or simply just too naive?
I don't think it was either of those. Now, bear in mind that American policy for more than 40 years, under every president, has been opposition to the Israeli policy with respect to settlements. President Obama said what every previous president had said, including Republicans and Democrats, that the United States doesn't support the policy of settlement construction in which the government of Israel has engaged. Understandably, and we all know, the government of Israel doesn't share that view. And so, even good friends, as we are, do disagree, and this is one issue on which we disagree.
But there's been a lot of finger-pointing at Prime Minister Netanyahu by people such as Bill Clinton, the former president, and others, saying that he's the source of the problem.
Yeah, I don't personally engage in or believe in finger-pointing as the way to solve a problem. I think the way you do it is to get together and figure out what the obstacles are and to try to overcome them. I personally negotiated with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other Israeli government officials to get a 10-month settlement on new housing construction activity, which was a significant action. Less than a total freeze, nonetheless significant. Unfortunately, the Palestinians would not enter the talks until 9 of those 10 months had elapsed, and then left when the moratorium expired. But look, that's the past. What we've got to concentrate now is on the future. Here we are, here's the situation, what are the problems, let's try to overcome them.
And what has happened in recent weeks is, of course, the Palestinians have now taken their campaign to the United Nations, where they're putting in a bid for statehood. What's your opinion of that?
Well, it's certainly understandable, and we all support Palestinian statehood, or at least the United States policy, and I'm sure other governments around the world do as well. We think there should be a Palestinian state. But both sides agree, and President Abbas and Prime Minister Netanyahu have both said publicly, including recently, that the only way they're going to get a state is through direct negotiation between the parties. The concern I have, and that President Obama has, is that going to the United Nations does not move them closer to negotiation, in fact, could move them further apart, and that the feelings will have escalated in a negative sense after that, and so getting them together again will be difficult. So we think the best way to do this is through direct negotiation between the parties with the active and sustained support of the United States and its allies.
Now, in regards to the 1,000 Palestinian prisoners who have been swapped for the release of the captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, this is a swap engineered by Hamas and not Fatah, which of course is President Abbas's party. Do you think as a result Fatah has been weakened by this?
I think it's given Hamas a boost. There can be no doubt about that. But prisoners have been released to Fatah before, and my hope is that the government of Israel will also release some prisoners to Fatah.
You support the notion of further prisoner release of Senator Mitchell, I understand.
Yes, I believe it would be helpful if the government of Israel released some prisoners to the Palestinian Authority headed by President Abbas.
Do you think President Abbas, though, has been weakened by this?
He got a big boost when he appeared before the United Nations and made the request for statehood. Hamas has gotten a boost out of this prisoner release now. Events change quickly in the Middle East. There could be another boost for President Abbas in some other event. None of this is static. Political figures, political parties go up and down depending upon events.
Finally, Senator Mitchell, do you see any chance of a breakthrough ever happening in this part of the world?
I don't think it will occur in the immediate future, but I believe soon enough the two parties will recognize that their interest lies in a negotiated agreement to establish two states.
Senator Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us. That's it for this edition of France 24 Interview.
Thank you.